Hello, everyone. I'm Amy Robinson, the founder and executive director of Loco BC. And today I'm here with Hillary Samson to talk about employee ownership. Hello, Hillary.
Hello, Amy.
Hi, thanks for
Great
being
to be
here.
here. Well,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. We've known each other a really long time. You've been involved with Loco for quite some time. Tell me about what you're doing this in a school right now. Tell me about what you're studying.
Sure. I made the crazy decision in my mid 50s to go back to school.
Yeah,
And so I'm
brave.
doing a doctorate. Thank you. I'm doing a doctorate of business administration at Royal Roads University.
Awesome.
And it's under the general category of reimagining capitalism. Royal Roads has the Canada Research Chair, Reimagining Capitalism.
Hmm.
So the amazing Julie MacArthur's my thesis advisor. And my specific topic is on employee ownership and workplace democracy
Hmm.
and how that can further what we call pro-social goals, how that can further
Right.
goals to help the world, the planet, people. Is there a relationship there? So that's my research is going to be on.
Right. So we're all trying to do that through business, right? Small and local business. I love that.
Me too.
Yeah, yeah. And reimagining capitalism, I think, is something we all need to be involved with, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's needed at this time
Yes.
for sure.
Yeah. So what is employee ownership? Like, can you define that for someone who might never have heard of it?
Sure. And you would think it'd be fairly straightforward. An employee owned workplace is a workplace that the employees own. But of
Hmm.
course, when you dive into the details, there's no real set definition. So somebody might give 3 or 5% of their shares to their employees.
Hmm.
Or, for example, a company might have partners, a law firm or a consulting firm. The partners might own
Hmm.
the shares of the business, and they would call that employee owned. But for my research and sort of the way people talk about employee ownership, it kind of has two main areas. So the first is broad employee ownership. So that means that everybody in the organization can participate, from
Hmm.
your lowest paid employee to your CEO. And then the second one is how much, like
Hmm.
what percentage is distributed to employees. And the research is a little unclear, but it's showing that you need to get about 25 to 30% employee ownerships. The employees own those shares before you really start seeing other benefits that you're looking for, like motivation, which we'll get into.
Hmm.
And I of course love majority owned employee.
Right.
Majority employee owned businesses are where I'm really particularly keen on, but where that's of course where over 51% of the business is owned by the employees. And then the
Hmm.
other thing I'll say about that is you can be an employee ownership directly. So you can own the shares, you yourself own the shares,
Hmm.
or it can be held for the employees, typically in a trust. So those are
Right.
the two main, and I can talk a little bit more about different kinds of employee ownership, but that's kind
Hmm.
of what employee ownership is when people talk
Right.
about it. They're typically talking about broader and more significant.
Right. I mean, I think it's interesting to talk about ownership, period, because it's really where the profits of the business go, right? We often hear at Loco, we're trying to explain, especially during this whole Buy Canada movement that's happening right now, about why it matters who owns the business, because it might be, like Canadian based, but still a public company where the actual profits of the business are still distributed, right? They're not really necessarily benefiting the employees or the community. And so, that is really, it's really important to me. And I basically from the economic research that shows that that's a big portion of what creates benefit. So,
Absolutely. And ownership matters.
yeah.
And certainly in our current economy, and the
Hmm.
current capitalist system that we have, it really matters who owns. It's
Yeah.
where the power lies,
Hmm.
and who holds the ownership typically holds the power and the
Right.
decision making. And so, of course, that has huge ripple effects for our economy and our businesses.
I hadn't really thought about, I think of employee ownership as, yeah, maybe it's set up that way, or maybe somebody wants to retire and so they transition. And so it's all the employees involved. But of course, there are models that have been around for a long time where, younger staff would not be involved, but all the higher level staff would be. So I imagine it's been around for a while, some form of this.
Yeah, for sure. So worker cooperatives were probably the
Hmm.
first The modern worker cooperatives are kind of from the 1800s.
Hmm.
And then you have, do you want me to kind of go over the
Yeah.
different types of
Yeah,
employee
for sure.
ownership? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
there's just sort of three types, and that sort of
Hmm.
roots us in what employee ownership is.
Yeah.
As I was saying, worker cooperatives, lots of people will be familiar with
Hmm.
cooperatives. And you can have cooperatives owned by members, or you can have cooperatives owned by the employees that work there, or
Hmm.
some combination of both. And as I say, they've been around a long time. They're super prevalent in Europe, but they're also really, we have a lot in Ontario, and Quebec is really quite strong in worker cooperatives.
Hmm.
And those are typically 100% employee owned, and there are certain principles that they follow, such as one worker, one vote.
Hmm.
There's a more democratic structure typically, although there doesn't have to be, in terms of like who gets to decide what happens in the operations of the business.
Hmm.
And there typically is some sort of community focus. So there's a belief that we're taking care of each other. That's built
Hmm.
into sort of the principles of worker cooperatives.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the most prevalent structure in the States, in the US, is called an ESOP, an employee share ownership plan, or sometimes employee stock ownership plan.
Hmm.
And ESOPs have been quite strong since around the 1970s, and kind of grow and shrink, but
Hmm.
more steadily growing over time. And what those are is a very specific tax break for both the employees and the businesses.
Hmm.
And they're a retirement fund. So you don't, you get when you retire, you put it into your, I think they're called 401ks in the US,
Hmm.
kind of RRSPs. And then they grow. And then when you retire, you can access those shares, and it can make a huge difference to people's retirement and lives.
Yeah.
But you may or may not, and often don't, get kind of that yearly profit sharing from the business.
Right.
Use your retirement vehicle.
So it's a one-time thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the employees own the shares
Hmm.
themselves directly, and all
Hmm.
the kind of complications that can
Right.
cause. So,
Yeah.
and then the other model, which is the most popular in the UK, and I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on in Canada with this, is
Hmm.
called an
Hmm.
employee ownership trust.
Okay.
And so the shares are in this trust,
Hmm.
and there's trustees. Ideally, also the employees help run and make decisions about
Mm.
the trust and other
Hmm.
trustees. And the employees, all employees are allowed to participate. Typically, you have to be working at the business sometimes 6 months, sometimes a year, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But you get every year, you're getting a share of the profits based
Hmm.
on what the trust, what the number of shares that the trust owns.
Right.
So, and then of course it's a little bit easier in terms of whether employees are coming and going, because you don't have individuals owning
Right.
shares. So it's a little bit, a little bit
Hmm.
easier to manage.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I hadn't even heard of that. So yeah, employee share ownership trust.
Yes. Well,
Yep.
maybe I'll tell you, if you haven't heard of
Hmm.
it, then this is a
Yeah.
great time
Yeah.
to talk about what's going on in
Yeah.
Canada. So 1 year ago, June 2024,
Hmm.
legislation passed for the employee ownership trust here in Canada.
Hmm.
And it's very specific model, and it has a very specific reason. So if it's the business owners are looking to sell their business, they can sell to this trust, and it has to be 51% owned by the employees.
Hmm.
So it is a majority trust. And the employees don't have to put up any money. The owner, the previous owner, takes money out of the profits over time of the business,
Hmm.
which of course causes risk for the owner. And in exchange for that risk, currently and for the next, well, it was a 2-year program, they get a $10 million capital gains exemption.
Oh,
So if your
okay.
business
Yeah.
is worth $10 million, it's about $3.5 million in the owner's pocket
Hmm.
from not paying those taxes. And so it's a real win-win
Hmm.
for Canada right now. And we've just seen the first couple employee ownership trust conversions
Hmm.
come online now. So it's
Right.
very
So
exciting
so
time.
selling the business to your employees, you get a tax benefit rather than selling it and having to pay capital gains.
Correct.
Right. Oh, that's so interesting. So any brands that we would know, like as you're mentioning these different models, I'm thinking about the Oh, the co-ops that I'm part of, or the ones that the retail stores that I know that are dealer-owned co-ops or things like that. So, yeah, I'd be curious. Can you share with us like some of the different businesses that might be big enough brands that we would, at least in BC, that we would know some of the businesses?
Sure. I think lots of your listeners will be familiar with Camino Chocolate and Camino
Oh, yeah.
Cocoa.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
100% employee owned.
Yeah. Oh,
And actually,
cool.
one of
Okay.
their former CEOs, Jennifer Williams, is a real
Yeah.
advocate in this space and a consultant and an expert. So that's very cool.
Mm.
And then what's I found super interesting is the construction industry in Canada is
Oh.
quite
Oh.
strong. So
Mm,
Ellis Dawn
oh,
and
I've heard of them. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you might
Mhm.
probably see the signs
Yeah.
throughout
Yeah.
construction
Construction
sites. And
sites. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and they have 4,300 employees worldwide, and they're
Mhm.
100% employee owned. And also Chandos, which is a bit smaller,
Oh,
700
Chandos, yeah, I know
employees.
them.
They're a
Yep, yep.
Canadian construction company,
Yeah,
and
they're
they're 100%.
Calgary or Alberta somewhere, right? Yeah,
So,
yep,
and they're both 100% employee owned and a B
yep.
corporation. So I
So,
know I was like, go construction industry in
right.
Canada.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then some
yeah.
other big names like there's Eileen Fisher, which is a
Mm,
fashion brand
mhm,
in the States, is 40%. And she's also quite an
mm,
advocate.
mhm,
And then the one I love is from the UK. It's called Waitrose. It's a big
mm,
supermarket chain
mhm.
and it's employee owned. And I love it because I feel like Canada could really use a strong network of employee owned supermarket and
Yeah, the
grocery
grocery
stores.
industry is just so, yeah, it's all consolidated here,
It's
right?
ready
Yeah,
for transformation. So
right.
yeah,
Yes,
that's
that's
it.
a good way
Yeah.
to put it.
Yeah.
Ready for transformation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. So, and then of course, there's
yeah,
loads of smaller ones too, but those
right.
are ones that you might be familiar with.
Yeah. And why would they do it? Like, what are the benefits of doing, any one of these structures?
Yeah, so there's a few different reasons. So one big one is something we've already talked about. So right now they call it the silver tsunami because of demographics. There is this, it's already started and anticipated over the next 10 years, a huge number of business owners retiring
Hmm.
and they can't necessarily find owners.
Yeah.
And if they can find owners, sometimes they're American private equity firms that want to
Mm,
buy their business, which we don't need to talk about the pros and cons
right.
of private
Why
equity
that's a
firms,
problem right now. Yeah, of all times.
but
Yeah.
not everybody loves that idea.
Yeah.
So yes, this EU employee ownership trust is such a great way to
Mm,
sell to your employees, and at least for the time being, unless the government extends this capital gains exemption
hmm
to really get that. So that's a big one, is to
hmm
allow the business owner to sell.
Right.
The other reason for employee ownership is because of all the benefits. So,
Mm,
so it has really well proven out in research. So much higher employee motivation, much higher employee engagement and retention. And then the really fun one that we had a great example because we just had a pandemic. So
hmm
these things I've learned are called economic shocks. So these
mm,
big waves of problems in the economy or in the society. And employee owned businesses withstand these economic shocks much better.
really? That
Yeah,
is
yeah.
so
The
interesting.
employees,
Yeah.
they work more collaboratively,
Yeah.
and and I think one of the biggest things that really addresses why they can be, and of course, there's a spectrum why they can be very valuable, is typically they take a longer term view of the business versus this sort of short term quarter by quarter view of the business,
Right.
and that
Yeah.
has so many benefits for the community, the society, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Rather than like we need to cut right now and what gets cut often employees and then, you can't run your business as effectively without your employees,
Yeah, and
so
right. And then the other reason companies would do it is because they want to participate in this wealth redistribution.
mhm,
So
right.
so people, more and more people are realizing this incredible damage that this the difference between the wealthy and the not
Mm,
wealthy, and the
hmm
growing difference between the wealthy,
hmm
it's having huge, in the short-term view of things, they're having huge long-term ramifications on our
hmm
world, on our people, on our
Yeah.
housing, on and on and on.
Yeah. And just the wealth extraction, right?
Oh,
Like just,
massive wealth.
yeah. And concentration is so problematic. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then that's what was so interesting, because I didn't know anything about this going into the research. The last 2.5 years
Mm,
has really been all the real harms that kind of shareholder capitalism and how it
Mm-hmm.
this wealth inequality.
Hmm.
And there are business owners like that want to, they want to do good for the environment. They want to do good for their employees.
Yeah.
They might be family-owned businesses that the family doesn't want to take over, and they feel like they owe, they not owe a debt, but they want to support and continue to support their employees who have been with them a long time. So
Mm-hmm.
people are doing that for those reasons too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, I'm thinking of examples. Like I know that I don't know if Phillips Brewing was set up as an employee-owned
I know that one.
business.
And I know
Okay,
Phillips,
yeah,
but I don't know
they're in
their
Victoria
story.
actually, based in Victoria. And then also Monroe's Books. Yeah, I remember when they retired, they wanted to, and it's such an iconic business that I thought it was so great that they just did something also very interesting. They had done business in an interesting way and built a great business, and then, to retire that way and sell to your employees is pretty cool too,
Oh, I'm so
you
glad you
know.
mentioned them. I forgot to mention them. That's great. That's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
excellent. Yeah,
Those are
yeah,
the ones that I just know
yeah.
about. And then, the dealer-owned co-op one that I mentioned is Home Hardware, which is based in, I think, St. Jacobs, Ontario, which I did not know. I thought they were like franchised, but yeah, we did some work with them a while ago just to see what local impact they had. And yeah, lots of cool businesses out there. It's, I'm sure as you're digging in, you're surprised to find out who's doing it. And yeah,
Absolutely. No, it's amazing. And
yeah.
the different takes on it, different structure and different
Hmm.
ways of running it. So it's
Hmm.
really fascinating. Mhm.
And that's something that came up for me is when you say shares, like how do you even like set that up? Because most businesses that would be just owned by like one person or a group of partners, um, wouldn't necessarily have share value, right? How do you even like, is that really challenging to set that up? Is that one of the main things that you have to do to get that going or?
Yeah, I would say, putting on as you know, I'm a consultant as well. I would say that if you're, have one employee, or maybe it's you and your family, and you want to really participate and get the benefits, you might do something a little simpler, like, for example, profit sharing, which is much
Mm-hmm.
easier.
Hmm.
It really is when you have a little bit of scale. Although I know companies with five employees, 9 employees that
Hmm.
have gone through the process. I'd
Hmm.
say if you have one, it's probably one or two. It's probably a bit of a bigger
Right.
structure to unless you're planning on growth. But once you have that kind of 10 employees, then it really
Hmm.
can make sense.
Yeah,
Unlike
very
any
cool.
other business structure, you're going to have to call your lawyer and your accountant
Right.
and
Yeah.
figure it out.
It's gonna be a process. Yeah.
And maybe a really great consultant who knows all the different forms, because it's going to depend what your goals are, which
Right.
of those three structures you're interested in. And yeah, of course, it takes some work to set it up.
Hmm.
That was one of the things that the EOT was to address with some of those challenges, because it
Hmm.
is a little bit more straightforward. And now that it's been passed as legislation, it's even more,
Right.
more clear. I don't know if it's easier, but it's more clear how to set up a trust
Hmm.
with your company. And most accountants are getting to know it, and so it is that way. But you have to want it. I mean, that's one of the challenges, right? Is like, if you're the current shareholder, you have to decide that this is important to you, and so
Right.
really digging into those benefits of why you would do this for yourself and what your goals are.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. And I hear that to sell your business, you really have to be thinking about it like far in advance, like 5 to 10 years, just and have, just all the things, all your ducks in a row, all your books up to date, all of that. And so, are there things that business owners should be thinking about in a timeline in terms of if they're interested in this? Because I just think a lot about people who retire, sometimes they're planning on it, and then sometimes you get like, one of those shocks and, oh, it's COVID, or, oh, interest rates, something, something happens and people are just, they bow out. And so, if those that want to plan a little bit in advance, do they need a couple of years to think this through and deal with the lawyers and the accountants and all of that?
Ideally, that's kind of the time frame you would want. But the
Mm,
most important thing is to talk about, like I say, the most important thing is, what are your goals? What are your
hmm. Great.
financial goals? What are your goals for your business longevity? Does it living beyond you? What do you want for your employees and your
Mm,
community? So first, that's always the first thing.
right.
What do you want?
Yeah, you have to figure out your
So,
goals. That makes sense. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
probably the
then
hardest thing. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
probably the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Most people can't answer that.
Yeah.
What do you want? I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that you have to start there. And then again, this trust kind of is interesting, and it's brand new, so nobody really knows
Hmm.
how it's going to roll out. But you could theoretically sell 51% of the business to your employees now, and
Mm.
keep the 49% and still be the CEO, still run the business. And then whether it happens, a certain percentage over time, or whether in 5 years you sell the other 49%. There are some interesting opportunities that this new
Hmm.
structure that we haven't seen it play out yet.
Right.
But as I'm diving more and speaking to people, all these kind of interesting scenarios are coming up, and I think it could be a very interesting way that that business owners can exit, not just beneficial to everybody, but also maybe perhaps a bit gentler than
Yeah.
just being shocked by it. And then, of
Hmm.
course, all the regular things, like, for example, having your standard operating procedure manual, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that
Of course.
it makes it easy to pass on how this business is running.
Mm.
And because there will be other things you have to add. So there has to be trustee meetings. And so there's other
Mm.
components of the
Hmm.
business. And then also you might want to, you don't have to have a different hierarchy of your business, but you might want to take this opportunity to have the employees participate more now that they're owners, and really
Hmm.
maximize that feeling of ownership in the business. And so that might also require some different operations and different processes and policies. So it's always good to have that quite well documented before you, what are we doing now? What are our goals? And what do we want to move towards?
Mm-hmm. What about the people side? Like, I'm curious about how that, like, how do you even engage your employees into, like, do you want to buy this business? Or, is there a reason why people wouldn't want to be an owner?
Well, I mean, there can be some risk. So
Mm.
certainly if it's a co-op, right,
Hmm.
that's it. For sure, there's risk. The biggest challenge with an employee-owned business and is financing and funding.
Right. Yeah.
So a venture capital company is looking for a certain rate of return. They want to own the shares. So
Mm.
who's financing and funding these alternative forms of organizing businesses? And of course, you have leaders like Van City, which is an
Right.
amazing leader in this space of
Mm.
funding different types of businesses. And then there's some funds in the US right now that are only funding employee-owned businesses. So they're kind of all in. So if you want to, as an investor, if you want to invest in that, you can. So that's certainly one of the reasons. If it's a highly cash-strapped business, you may be
Mm-hmm.
concerned to
Right.
put it over to employee ownership. And there is more, like I say, there's more things to consider, like who's going to run the trust, who's going to be the trustees, how's that going to affect the board.
Mm.
And then, and this might be like why you wouldn't as an owner, um, uh, because now the employees, they do have authority, they have
Hmm.
agency, and they can, for example, block a further sale of the business, for example.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to sort of think through who has the responsibilities, what are their responsibilities, what are their rights,
Mm-hmm.
and think through that. It's a lot. It's a lot of opportunities. I like to think of it more, but there's certainly things to think through.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Very interesting.
Mhm.
So you said that legislation was helping. What else is needed to help more of this, facilitate more of this in the future?
Well, definitely the financing funding is a big piece for sure,
Hmm.
and also just this kind of like understanding of the benefits, I would say. Um, so employee-owned businesses are considered more democratic, for example, whether you just own the shares and you get to vote for the sale of the business, for example, if it's as minimal as that, or you can have much more democratic workplaces, typically like a lot of some employee co-ops and some other businesses have really embraced this idea of workplace democracy.
Right.
And it's really fun. This really interesting emerging research right now is that you can't really teach democracy. You have to live democracy, and you
Mhm.
live it best if it's in multiple areas of your life. You know, your family teaches it. You have certain family things, your school pack, and your workplace, as well as voting.
Mhm.
And you have to grow democratic citizens.
Mhm.
And I do wonder, with everything that's going on, because when you look at the history of businesses, how incredibly not democratic they are and how
Yes,
extractive
right.
they are.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
keep thinking, oh, I'm wondering if the degradation of our democracy or as citizens is can be at all linked to that. And there's no research that's gone
Mm-hmm.
there yet that I know of, but it's
Mm-hmm.
so fascinating. So, in terms of what we need this understanding of how important it is to recognize our interconnectedness,
Mm.
our responsibilities to not just ourselves and our immediate family, but our community, and how employee ownership can be such a great
Mm.
step towards fulfilling those responsibilities in our society.
So interesting because capitalism, it's like we are used to this very transactional, right? Like it's sort of like that's what I fought against in my work is like trying to place the value on money and to place the value on, your purchases, whether you're a consumer or a business, is to think about all the great value you can get and that it is a relationship, right? But I think that, yeah, the marketplace a lot drives us towards that, right? Like the sort of faceless, nameless, yeah, online transactions where something just shows up at your, your door. You have no idea, no link. And
Well,
so,
this
yeah,
is,
I think
yeah,
that's
and just
so
thinking about
interesting.
your work, Amy, in terms of keeping things local,
Hmm.
uh, this wealth is distributed to the employees in your
Yeah,
community and their
exactly.
families.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they're never going to make an Amazon purchase or go to an
But the
international
ripple effects
vacation, but
potential of
most of
that,
that
right?
money is going to
Yeah.
stay in the community, and
Yeah.
everybody's going to benefit versus, say,
Right.
a US owned private equity company, for
Hmm.
example, or
Hmm.
fund that owns your business. So
Yeah.
it just, yeah, it really makes these huge differences in a community if you can
Mm.
have these employee owned
And it's
businesses.
really like a tool of like the democratization of the wealth distribution too, right? Because I think about like I don't know who did I hear, Dr. Bronner's or somewhere someone has like I think it's the maximum 2.5 times like their lowest employee versus their highest employee, which is usually the CEO, and they never want to have a bigger ratio than that, right? So it's sort of trying to bring everyone along within a band of wealth that the company creates, whereas the all the other models are, it's extracted to the top and everybody else. It's like a very steep pyramid, right? So
Yeah, right
so.
now they just to put on that, because I just read it
Mhm.
recently, the ratio to that for kind of shareholder capitalist companies, your
Yeah.
kind of conventional companies, is 1 to 300, around 345 right now. So yeah. And you really see that, I'm starting to really get curious about all the
Hmm.
stats, the
Yeah.
top pay of CEOs and workers has gone up by over 300% over the last 30 years, and of the non-managerial worker, it's gone up 5% over the
Right.
past
So not
30
even
years.
remotely meeting inflation, right? Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and then that gap is
Yeah.
increasing, and so that's what drew me to do the doctorate. Is
Mm.
it's like we need a fundamental architectural shift in our
Mm.
businesses, and what emerged for me was this
Mm.
idea of employee ownership and democratic workplaces as
Hmm.
actually the addressing it right at the core, as opposed to
Hmm.
something like philanthropy, which is you know
Yeah.
great,
Yeah.
and that's so far down the line, and
Yeah.
it still can be, it's not addressing the very architecture of business that I feel like we need right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it sounds like you said education is needed, funding and financing is needed, the legislation that's,
Yes, an
in place
extension
is
of that
helping. Yeah. Yeah.
legislation in terms of giving the tax
Right.
relief
Because it was only two
really good.
years,
It was
right?
only two
Okay.
years. Yes.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And then who would fund and finance? Like who would we be calling on to do the funding and financing?
Well, I mean, I think it's institutions like Van City and
Hmm.
more banks.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not someone who's steeped in how
Hmm.
financing and funding
Yeah.
works, but your government can legislate what banks do. They do it all the time,
Hmm.
so they could create certain incentives or legislation where you can't reject someone just on the basis of employee ownership.
Right. Yeah.
Is a
Yeah.
thought that came to me.
Hmm.
And then people who do have the means to do investing, invest in these
Right.
different alternate organizing forms
Hmm.
that are both social ventures, that are trying to
Yeah.
do good in the world, but also take this wealth redistribution seriously and take it into account. So
Hmm.
that would make
Hmm.
a big difference too.
Yeah. I love that. And I love the idea of the tools for like the average investor too. And if they have that in the US, it would be amazing if we had some in Canada where those of us that want to get our money out of other types of businesses in the stock market and whatever, which I've been trying to do personally. And if there were an opportunity to invest in employee-owned businesses, I would certainly try to look at
And there
that.
might be,
So.
if someone knows of one, let
Right.
us know.
Yeah, let us
I haven't
know.
found one, but
I would love to know as well. Or if
yeah,
the one gets
exactly.
set up soon, then
Mhm.
yeah, it'd be great to hear about.
Mhm.
Anything else we should know about that I didn't ask?
Well, just maybe about kind of the future where employee
Hmm.
ownership is
Yeah,
going. I'd
yeah,
love to chat about that a little
for
bit
sure.
because what's so fascinating right now is this marriage between social ventures. So, as we know, there's things like B corporations that
Hmm.
have a
Hmm.
very structured way of helping the environment, and there's community contribution corporations.
Hmm.
And then there's just social ventures that are trying to do good in the world.
Right. Yeah.
And there is a real leader called Marjorie Kelly in the U.S. She actually was one of the I don't know if she started the B Corp, but she certainly was a big
Yeah, I know that
influencer.
name. I know that name for some reason. Yeah. Yeah.
And she's all in right now on social ventures and B Corps being employee owned. For
Wow.
her,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
this missing piece. She's got this 50 by 50, so 50 million employees being employee owned
Hmm.
by
2050. Yeah.
2050.
Very cool.
And it really makes sense to me because you and I both work with a lot of social ventures,
Hmm.
and it really is, as I'm learning more, it really doesn't sit quite right that if you're trying to do good in the world, but you're still engaging in this employee extraction, um, system. Is that the right fit? Like, our social ventures. I know there's lots of circumstances, but it makes a lot of sense for them to be
Hmm.
employee owned.
Yeah. No, I love this model because that is literally like people often ask me why I started Loco, and it's because I was following some of the very first social entrepreneurs who were like, we can integrate social and environmental values into our business and still like they hoped still follow the traditional financial trajectory of like going all over, having franchises all over, or going public or what. And they found out that actually you can't, like you can be a B Corp and go public and look what's happening with Etsy, like there's just so many examples and they felt it themselves, like Judy Wicks and Stonyfield Farms and all these organizations who, they were just like, actually, small is beautiful. The way to keep it, you have to keep it local. Like you have to figure out how to go deeper with your own people or your own community or your own supply chain. And that's the way to, yeah, like that they haven't found another way to work that it works within our capitalist system. Like that it
Yeah,
just
it's
doesn't
called
work.
no, no. I've been reading a little bit about that too. It's called mission creep, is
Mm,
the
hmm,
kind of term for it,
right.
where you start out and your main goals are financial. I'm sorry, your main goals are social
Mm,
purpose goals, or maybe they're a balance of profit and social purpose.
hmm,
And then over time, it's just so much. It just starts to become about profit again. Like
yeah,
it's what we know how to measure. It's what we know how to.
right. Yeah.
I'd say, oh, that's probably just I'll throw that in there too. Different measurement tools is
Mm,
also
hmm.
kind of something that is always needed for these alternative organizing, and there's lots of
Right.
brilliant minds working on that as well.
Right. Right.
And then the only other thing I always like to kind of bring home is people talk about consumers and buying local, and of course that's so important.
Hmm. Hmm.
But one thing that I think we need to emphasize more is the power of the employees.
Hmm.
So that's, my research is really on the worker. And there's a lot of amazing research going on, focusing on leaders. But
Hmm.
I'm
Right.
fascinated with the power of the employee,
Hmm.
because if you take your consent away from engaging in these systems, that's a much bigger ripple effect than someone not buying one product once. And if you, and of course, everyone's in a very different circumstance, but if you choose to take your talent and put that into an employee-owned business, that will have a big effect. And employee-owned businesses, especially worker cooperatives, have been shown to be the Canadian Worker Cooperative Alliance, I think it's called. They call it equity denied groups. And so
Sorry,
worker
it's
cooperative
equity is, what did you call it?
equity denied. So equity,
Oh,
like
oh,
the
okay.
shares of
Equity
business.
denied. Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, traditional groups that were traditionally denied, like women,
Yeah.
LGBTQ, 2S plus, and BIPOC
Mhm.
individuals, they tend to be finding a better home or a better work environment in these employee-owned businesses. And I think
Right.
that research is still emerging, but it's starting to come to light. And I love that. So that's another thing you can think of as an employee, especially if you are in one of those groups, like where can I take my talent and expertise and be
Right.
the most effective?
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. That's very exciting. I thought
Thank
I
you
knew
for
a
this
little bit about
opportunity.
it, but I clearly didn't know as much as I thought. I learned a lot. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank
And
you.
where can people find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, I'm just pulling my head up from the computer screen and getting reimmersed in the world. I still have a Samson consulting website. I can definitely
Hmm.
find me there, although I haven't transitioned it over to my new work in
Right.
democratic workplaces and employee ownership yet, but
Hmm.
people are welcome to find me there. And I do I am on LinkedIn as well, so you
Yeah.
can certainly
Yeah.
find me
Okay.
there too.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amy.